All right. Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to another edition of the Forward to Rise podcast. I'm your host, James Brown. Today, we have a very interesting topic, which I say every week, but this week's a really, really interesting topic that I've been trying to put together for the past 3 months. Uh, Today's topic is LGBTQ, and I'm honored to have my guest and honestly someone that I went to high school with, which makes it even better, Professor Jabri Douglas. Professor, how are you?
I'm doing good today, doing good.
Good, good, good. All right. Well, let's kind of jump into it. Uh,
Okay.
One of the first things that people wonder is what do all of these letters mean? I mean, the term LGBTQ hasn't been out for that long, especially not in the mainstream. So, can you explain to me what each one of those letters mean?
hmm hmm Yeah, so LGBTQ,
Hmm.
it's basically an acronym for some of the common identities within the community. Um,
Okay.
L stands for lesbian, and that's usually
Mhm.
cisgender. So cisgender meaning women who were born women, assigned female at birth. They identify that way,
Okay.
engage in a loving romantic relationship. Gay, actually, historically has been to signify again cisgender men who are assigned male at birth, identify as male, and them entering same gender loving relationship. But really, gay has kind of broadened to mean,
Hmm.
both men and same sex women couples, right? Um,
Okay.
B stands for bisexual, who are people who um, date across the sexes. So they date both
Okay.
men and women. Uh,
Okay.
and then T stands for transgender, which actually isn't a sexual orientation like
Okay.
being gay, bisexual are. Uh, T transgender is actually a gender identity. Okay.
Okay.
So trans means, the root word trans means different, change. So usually people who identify as trans do not identify with the sex assigned birth,
Okay.
whether that's male or female. Okay.
Okay.
And also trans people can have an array of sexual orientations, right?
Okay.
So for example, and I think we'll come back to the trans community in a bit,
Yes.
keep it simplified.
Sure.
So Q is actually a word, it stands for queer.
Okay.
It's actually a word that has been reclaimed in the LGBT, lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender community, as really a form of resistance, right? So, for
Okay.
example, queer, it used to be a derogatory term,
Hmm.
right? For the LGBTQ community, if you can kind of compare it, it was our version of, can I use explicit language on the show?
Knock yourself out.
Okay. It was our LGBTQ's community's version of nigger, right?
Hmm.
When you heard the word queer at a time in history, that almost signified that you were going to be beat down, abused, or even killed, right? And so
Okay.
community, we have reclaimed this word, and now it has become an identity as a form of resistance, right? Uh,
Okay.
and so those are some of the kind of basic terms. Sometimes you see intersex. Intersex is actually a word that has replaced the derogatory form of the word, which was hermaphrodite. Uh,
Okay.
Hermaphrodite is essentially the same thing as intersex, but now that term hermaphrodite is derogatory, it's outdated, it's no longer used. We now
Really?
term intersex.
I
Exactly.
did not know that.
Yes.
I've learned
But
something interesting today.
yeah, there are many more identities, but those are like um the main identities. You may see like A may stand for ally or asexual or folks that really don't have to simplify it, like a sexual drive towards people. Like they engage in romantic relationships based off of feeling, not
Okay.
necessarily a sexual drive, but those are the common terms. Yeah.
Now, when you describe bisexual,
Yeah.
you said that it's people that date different genders. They pretty much date across the spectrum.
They did
Um,
across sex across the sectors, because there's also,
okay.
and again getting into that alphabet soup, there's
Hmm.
also pansexual, which
Hmm.
is, I guess you could say, a step further than bisexual, right? So
Okay.
bisexual are people who date men and women, people who identify as male, people who identify as female, whereas
Hmm.
pansexual, okay, are people who date across the sexes as well as the gender spectrum, right?
Okay.
For example, a bisexual person may only date, you know, cisgender men, cisgender women, whereas a pansexual person may date trans men, trans women, you know, any,
Mm.
regardless of their gender or sex.
Okay. Now, how long has this whole pansexual identification been out? Because it's still fairly new.
Yeah, I would say pansexuality is um a recent identity, but it's
Mhm.
really interesting because a lot of these identities are not new. The language
Mhm.
is new, but the identity isn't, right? We have
Okay.
people who have identified as trans in indigenous communities. They just called it spirit.
Oh
Okay.
wow. Okay.
Yeah, so indigenous and what we call Indian communities, you know, first generations here in the Americas, they had transgender identities. They just called it something else, right? So these things
Okay.
are not new. The language is new.
Okay.
You have to clarify that.
Okay. Now, there's something that I've heard, a term that I've heard recently, non-binary.
Yes.
Can you explain what that is?
Yes. So people who are non-binary, they don't
Mhm.
ascribe to, I guess you could say, the gender performance of the sex assigned at birth, right? Like they don't,
Okay.
if they were assigned male at birth, they don't prescribe to what it means to be a man, but they also don't prescribe to what it means to be a woman, right? They don't
Mm.
identify as a woman, they don't identify as a man, they identify across the gender spectrum, right? And that can show
Okay.
up differently in different ways, right? And to give you an example, my own identity, I identify myself as queer, as I guess you could say
Okay.
sexual orientation, but my gender identity, I tell people that I'm transgender non-conforming, right? Meaning that my sex assigned at birth was female, right? That's
Hmm.
what the doctor, you know, came out of my mom. That's what they assigned to me, but I don't ascribe to like that womanhood, right? Like I actually
Okay.
look at my life, I wasn't birthed into a regular womanhood, right? Like I didn't have the conversations with my mom about, you know, my mens and all of this stuff. Like you even saw me when I was in high school. I wanted to be
Yeah.
on the boys, like, you know, that was
Yeah.
just me naturally, right?
Yes.
I was a little kid. So I don't ascribe to what it means to be female assigned at birth, but I also don't identify as a man. I'm not a man. I never, you know, I don't say that I am. That's not what I
Hmm.
am, but I'm gender non-conforming, right? I don't
Okay.
conform to the gender assigned at birth. I'm also non-binary. Like I don't conform to what it means to be a woman, to what it means to be a man. I'm just across the spectrum, right?
So if someone were to ask you how you identify yourself, would you want them to say he, she, them?
Pronouns are actually They, them, theirs.
They, them. I'm sorry, what is it? They, them, theirs?
Yeah. Yep.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, I had a little run-in with that whole description. I'll get into it a little bit later.
Uh-huh.
Because again, it's so new. It's really, really the description of it is so new. The name of it is so new.
Hmm.
Um, so yeah, but I'll get into that a little bit later.
Yeah.
Uh, at what point in your life did you feel that you were non-binary? I'm sorry, not non-binary, not non-binary, transgender, non-conforming. At what point of your life did you feel that I don't feel like a girl, or I don't feel like a boy? When did you feel that for the first time?
Um, it's interesting, right? Like how
Hmm.
sexuality and gender identity evolves, right?
Okay.
First, I'll talk about sexuality, right? I
Hmm.
remember the first time that I felt something different for the same sex. I was in the second grade, and it was this girl in my class. I just loved to smell her hair. Like I was in
Okay.
like what I thought was in love in the second grade.
Hmm.
I feel like 8 or 9 in second grade or whatever. I
Hmm.
love to smell her hair, and I would feel a little bit of tingles. You know what I mean? I didn't know.
Hmm.
I didn't have language for what I was feeling, but I
Okay.
knew that like, yeah, this is. You have that inkling, that knowing, right?
Hmm.
In terms of gender identity, I never really felt like I was always like, I never really felt like I was a woman or a girl, you know what I mean? Because I just wasn't raised in that way,
Hmm.
right? And I guess that the ability for me to develop into who I was really has always been there, because when I talk to like my grandmother, who really I spent a lot of time, like my mom, like my grandma's like my mom, you know. I do have a mom, I love my mom, but my grandma's like that second mom, right? And
Okay.
I came out to my mom, my grandmother. She
Uh,
told me like I knew that this was going to be your life at 5 years old. I told your mother, I had a conversation with your mother that this would
mhm,
be what it is, because I saw it.
mhm,
And so we go into this, we can also segue into a conversation about kids and their knowing, right? um,
okay.
but in terms of me kind of going into my identity, it came in, I guess you could say, like my late 20s, you know,
Okay.
where I really kind of understood what I had been feeling all this time.
So would you say that you would have considered yourself to be a lesbian before that, before deciding to become transgender non-conforming?
Yeah, so before I actually understood like my gender identity, I
Hmm.
understood my sexual orientation. So I did identify as a lesbian for many years,
Okay.
until I was like, you know what, I identify as like transgender, non-binary, and I'm like,
Hmm.
lesbian doesn't really fit anymore, because I really don't identify as a cisgender woman. Cis, for those who came on, cisgender meaning like you were assigned female at birth, you identify the female, everything, pretty much lines up, right?
Hmm.
Never, I didn't feel that way. So I was like, I can't possibly be a lesbian if I'm not a cisgender woman, dating other cisgender women. Women doesn't align. So
Hmm.
that's when I began to identify as queer. It kind of opened me up to say, all right, I still, in the LGBTQ community.
You're breaking up a little bit. You're breaking up a little bit.
Can you hear me now?
I can hear you now. Yes.
Yeah. I was just saying,
Hmm.
like, so I started to, once my gender identity changed, I
Hmm.
started to identify as queer. Like my sexual orientation also changed.
And just for clarification again, what does queer mean again in terms of sexual orientation? Does that mean that you date men? Does it mean that you date women? Does it mean that you date both? Does it mean that you date all? Can you just explain again what that means again?
Yeah. So queer, as I was saying, is really a term that's in like a form of resistance. It basically just say for it opens it up so that for those who don't identify within the traditional sexual orientation, so lesbian, gay, bisexual, and those who identify within the traditional gender identities of cisgender woman, cisgender man, it gives a space to exist, right?
Okay.
It just is in resistance to a binary, is in resistance to like these rigid ideas of what sexuality has to be, right? And
Okay.
if you talk to many like heterosexuals, it's like, all right, either you gay or you straight. That's it. I
Hmm.
can't
Hmm.
fathom this world in which other identities exist, but that's where queerness comes. Like there's this other identity where people can exist in many different ways, right? It's open, it's rigid, it's not rigid as to say, like, you know, lesbian is just two women, right? Or gay is two.
Hmm.
It's not as rigid as that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Huh. Yeah, I'm learning so much right now. just
Yeah.
just in general. Now we both lived in black households growing up, and you know that in a lot of black households, being gay, being lesbian, that's one of the worst things that you can do in a lot of black households.
Which is unfortunate.
Yeah. Mhm.
Because in those same households, if we really want to have a conversation,
Mhm.
you pedophilia is accepted more than, you know, a person being gay. But we won't go into that conversation, but that's the truth of it, right?
We're gonna get into that later. Trust me.
The
Did you?
scary uncle, right?
Yeah, yeah. We're definitely gonna get into that later. Um, did you have to hide your sexual orientation or your sexuality growing up? And if you did, what was that like?
Yeah. So let me think. When I first came out to my mom
Mm.
when I was 13,
Okay.
right? Going into high school. And,
Hmm.
uh, you know, like traditional black households, single mom, like it
Yeah.
wasn't accepted, right?
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
but I couldn't really, like, it became this secret lifestyle. It became this secret, you know?
Hmm.
Like sneaking around and also it also became like this internalized homophobia because I just didn't, who I was wasn't accepted in the world, so I had
Hmm.
internalized that as that, like, I'm not accepted, like I'm not worthy, I'm not, you know, I'm damaged, I'm this, I'm that, you know what I mean, because it wasn't accepted in the world. And so for
Hmm.
many years I struggled with that, right? Like
Hmm.
in the college, I didn't date anybody going in college. I didn't have sex in college. I didn't date anybody in college. Like I just wasn't my world
Hmm.
in college. Like I wasn't associated with anyone in college because again, struggling with this internal conflict of knowing who I am, but also being afraid of that rejection that I got when I was 13, more innocent than I was when I came out at like 21, 22.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Now, with a lot of families, and not just black families, but one of the things that I've often seen is, if you think that you're gay, you're an abomination. We need to take you to church so that we
Yeah.
can pray it out of you. I don't know if you had to go through that. Was that something that was discussed in your life? That you don't know what you really want. We need to take you to church
Mhm.
because that's just an evil spirit inside of you.
Mhm. No, that wasn't my experience. Like my family is a spiritual family, but we're not a religious family. So we
Okay.
didn't like, I wasn't raised in a church. You know, only
Okay.
a stint in my life when we lived in Georgia, it was just the Southern way, right? We would go to,
Sure. Sure.
after we left Georgia, no, I I wasn't raised, but I did have friends who, like my close group of friends in high school who were quite religious. I would go to church with them and
Okay.
internalize that messaging as well. So I
Okay.
actually became more religious by proxy of my friends, you know?
mhm,
And I actually internalized homophobia in the same way that many people in the church internalized homophobia, right? So that
mhm,
was a whole nother layer, like as a young teenager, you know, and I'm not saying that my friends forced me into anything or anything like that.
mhm,
That was my experience, right? Because of my friends and like going to church with them and things like that. To a point where even like I always remember it, like even like Barack Obama talks about this, right? When he, you know, called, you know, back in the day called somebody fags and all of that. And
mhm,
now knowing that it's not right, apologizing for it, right? The
mhm.
same for me when I was in undergrad, there was a transgender girl on my campus and I lit her up with the
Mhm.
transphobic, homophobic slurs. And
Mhm.
I can imagine what that did to her. But it really came from this inner conflict, right? That was going on within me, right?
Yeah.
And that's a lot of times what happened. And not saying that all the time, but really when you have the most homophobic person in the room, it's really because they have an internal conflict that
Oh
they're
wow.
unwilling to recognize.
Yeah, yeah. That you often see that with politicians. When you have the politician that's usually the most anti-gay, you usually find it about them in a hotel room with someone of the same sex. They're usually fighting against that themselves. And
Exactly.
so, yeah, that's definitely new. Now, I know that you said that you went into the church and I guess started to accept the word, going to the church with your friends. The church in certain cases does have a history of homophobia. In a
Mhm.
lot of churches, they still see it as an abomination. When George W. Bush was president, that was one of the things he tried to push. He tried to push a ban on gay marriage with the backing of the church. How were you accepted once you went to church?
Mhm. So remember, I wasn't out during those times.
Oh, okay. All right.
Yeah,
All right.
I wasn't out during those times, even in undergrad. Like I wasn't
Mm,
out during undergrad. I went to undergrad at the University of Georgia, Athens,
mhm,
Georgia. If anybody has ever been there, is like pretty much rural Georgia. You know, the
mhm, mhm,
university is the city in a sense.
mhm,
So I wasn't out then going to church again, internalizing that homophobia. It
mhm,
wasn't until I found a non-denominational church in Jersey City. They actually don't exist there
mhm,
anymore. The New Life Christian Healing Center, right?
mhm,
Might be messing up the term, but yeah, the New Life Christian Center, something to that effect, where they really taught the word from a more pure sense, right?
okay.
And
Okay.
actually like, no, like this isn't what we actually think that it means,
Mhm,
right? And a lot of times people say like, oh, Jesus says, you know, man should not lie with man, but really when you look at the text, it's not, that never came out of Jesus's words. It came out of the apostle Paul. He said that, you
mhm,
know, but Jesus not once said it. And so if we're going, and then we also have to go into historical text as well, right?
mhm,
So me learning the actual text from a different perspective allow for me to see that there is a space for me um within spirituality. And I say that intentionally, right? Because
mhm,
religion, you know, Christianity, pure Christianity or whatever, there is no space because of the interpretation of the text is, in my opinion, incorrect, right? But within spirituality, when you actually sit with the text, when you sit with also supplemental information of the text, right, you learn a totally different thing. Um, and so I do see that there is a space for me. So that aids in like my own spiritual relationship that I have with God today.
mhm. Now, when you went to the church and when you would hear this homophobia or when you read the Bible on your own,
Mhm.
uh, did you internally have a struggle? Did you internally feel a little guilty because you weren't conforming to what the church was telling you that you should do or the life that you should lead?
At the time, yes. At the time,
Okay.
yes. And that aided into the internalized homophobia. It aided
Okay.
to an anger against people who, before I came out, were openly LGBTQ. You know,
Okay.
that was the cause of me, lighting that trans girl up with my words, right?
Mhm.
That aided in that, right? That guilt, that shame, that anger, that fear of what this text has taught me, but also what the rejection of the world has taught me from the first
Mhm.
time I came out as a kid.
So, do you think that the world feels they do because of certain misconceptions of
Absolutely.
the? What are some of the misconceptions that you think are out there, or that you perceive, or that are perceived of the LGBTQ community?
hmm I think one of the biggest misconceptions is that who we are is wrong and who we are is different, and us fighting for our rights is especially as it relates to the Black community. Us fighting for our rights is taken away from Black people getting their rights, or that we should be on the back burner, right? Like our justice should be on the back burner. I think also that we have an agenda. That's a misconception, right? There is no gay agenda. What it is wanting to feel less subjugated in a world that rejects who we are, right? Um, I would also say another misconception is that um, for a long time, as it relates to as it relates to gay men, there was also this tie and association between gay men and pedophilia, that gay men were pedophiles, right? That's also a major misconception, a huge misconception that needs to be broken in mainstream society. Um, Also, this misconception that we're careless in terms of gay and trans folks and the number of HIV/AIDS cases and things like that within the specific gay and trans community. We are not careless. There are other systems at play that lead to those numbers being so high in the gay and trans community, right? That it's a lot of misconceptions out there, and those are some of the biggest ones that I think about, specifically around this idea of like we have an agenda, like us expressing who we are, you know uh forces kids to want to be gay and stuff like that. None of that is true.
You actually read my mind because I was actually going to get into that next.
Yeah.
Uh, there was a conversation that we've actually been having for a couple of weeks about the Rocco's Modern Life movie. For those that don't know, Rocco's Modern Life was a cartoon that was big in the 90s. It was a goofy cartoon. You had these characters, they were animals, but it was a children's cartoon. And I know that we disagree on this, but the movie came out, I believe, last year or the year before, and the cartoon took a character that was in 2 episodes of the entire series,
Mhm.
made them the main character of the movie, and made them transgender. I know that we're going to disagree with this, um, but I think that when you have a movie like that, when you have something that's aimed at children, that you should maybe have a warning label if you're going to have something like that, something that's such a sensitive topic, so that you can at least give the parents the opportunity to talk to their children about it. I think that what they did with that movie is they just kind of snuck it in and just said, okay, well, hopefully nobody will notice. Or in essence, it's kind of like forcing you or forcing children to see it without necessarily giving, again, the parents the opportunity to say, you know what, let's talk about this. I think that maybe he should have said, hey, we're going to discuss some adult themes. We're going to discuss a different lifestyle from the show. If it were the type of thing like Sesame Street, where they've always done that, or certain other shows where you've always had characters that may have been LGBT or may have appeared to be LGBT, that would understand. Or even if it was a main character, I would understand. But I feel that they took, for me, I feel that it was cheap because you take a character who was barely in the show, make them the main character just to make them just to make them transgender. Um, I think that they at least should have had a warning up there just to give parents the opportunity to say, you know what, I want to sit down and watch this with my children, or I want to talk to my children about this first. And you disagree with me on that, correct?
Absolutely.
Okay. What are your views on it?
So here are my views, right?
Mm-hmm.
If we are calling for a warning label, right, for
Mm-hmm.
anything that has LGBTQ content in it, right, for kids,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
we absolutely need a warning label for any heterosexual content as well, right? Like to a heterosexual couple kissing, holding
Mm-hmm.
hands, that needs to be there as well. Parents should be able to have the opportunity to talk to their kids about two kissing, right?
But,
Regardless, heterosexual couples, like that should be there as well.
but
I
I think that they actually. I'm sorry. No, but I think that they actually do. They change the rating if they have those types of things. So the cartoon may go from Y7 or from G to PG. So I think that in certain cases, like for instance, this cartoon was Y7. It's a cartoon aimed at 7-year-olds.
my 7.
That means it's for children that's 7 and under.
Mm-hmm.
So I would think that if you're going to have those themes, maybe you should change the rating, make it PG.
Mm-hmm.
I can think back to a time where, you couldn't even take sex education without your parents giving you permission,
Mm-hmm.
because your parents may have said, I want to discuss this with my child myself.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so I think that they should kind of do that same thing with these types of shows that are aimed at young children, or at least give parents the opportunity to know or get an idea as to what's in the show.
Mm-hmm. There, I guess I see it differently because the reality is that
Mm-hmm.
most parents don't know how to talk to their kids about LGBTQ folks, right? Most parents will probably come from their own knowing of like, this is wrong,
Mm-hmm.
especially
Mm-hmm.
within the Black community. Not saying that Black people are more homophobic than any other racial category, because that's actually factually untrue, right?
Mm-hmm.
But most parents just don't know how to talk to their kids in a way that will allow for the kids to be like, oh, okay, cool. This is what it is, right? And I
Mm-hmm.
think we also take what's the word I'm trying to use? Agency from kids, that kids they understand what's going on. Like we think because we're older, we have life experience, that we are all knowing and that we have to teach kids things, but really kids experience every day. Like I'm pretty sure somebody in their class is trans, right? The way kids are coming out as trans today. And I also think that we don't give these shows enough credit, that they have consulted with psychologists, that they have consulted with, children's writers for it to be children appropriate, to teach a message about tolerance and acceptance, right? That regardless of who someone is, they are just a person. Whereas if I allow for my mom or my family to teach me about being, transgender people, I would have gotten as, oh, that's a different person, learn all these different terms, he, she, fag, whatever, fairy, like, but that would have been my learning in my household because my mom just didn't know how to talk about it, right? Because these are shows that again have been consulted with psychologists, have been consulted with children's writers to make a message, get a message across about who these communities are for age appropriate audiences. If as a parent, I don't have the ability to get that message across unless my message is anti-transgender or anti-gay, then that's a different conversation, right? If you're
But
transgender, anti-gay, then yeah, you don't want your kid looking at a message that says that everybody should be accepted for who they are and that there is nothing wrong with a person being transgender or LGBTQ.
Now, here's the flip side. Here's the flip side. What if there are people that are against that lifestyle? Because I do know people that are anti-LGBT. They don't like that lifestyle. They want to explain it to their child their own way. Again, I think it goes to the ratings thing, because maybe they don't want their child to see that. Because again, I take it back to the whole family life thing or sexual education classes. Their view was that they're not going to let the school teach sex education. They want to do it themselves. They don't want to give someone the opportunity. And I think that sometimes when you put these in cartoons like that, you're taking that right away from the parents. I don't have children, so uh, you know, I don't have children, so I can't really say, but I do have nieces and nephews.
Mm-hmm.
But I've spoken to people that have children. They've said to me, hey, if something like that came on, I would want to know ahead of time.
I think it's because it's a conversation out of fear. Like, if my kid is exposed to this is what they'll become, and that's not true. There are a bunch of queer LGBTQ kids that have seen heterosexual couples all of their life and don't want anything to do with being heterosexual. You know what I mean? So if these TV shows were intended to, quote unquote, turn people out, then there should be no LGBTQ people existing, because even today, nearly all television shows, movies is predominantly heterosexual. So that conversation, what my child sees is going to in turn turn them out, is factually untrue.
I can tell you right now, this part is
between love and hate. And I still don't want to marry and have sex with a man. Okay.
I can tell you right now, this is going to be a very popular topic during the Q&A. So yeah, this is going to be an interesting one to cover. People are going to have questions about during the Q&A section.
That's cool.
Yeah. I mean, the good thing about the show is the good thing about this episode is that we'll be able to discuss it, whether we agree or disagree. We'll at least be able to listen to each other and speak to each other and try to get an understanding. All right. Now, here's a interesting question that I think that I already know your answer with.
Okay.
Do you feel that in certain ways there's too much enforced acceptance of the LGBT lifestyle?
No. Because people, like
Mm-hmm.
we're people, like we're human beings. It should be like this is the reasoning behind, in 2020 still having hate crimes, right? Because like people just don't see us as human beings, right? It's so unfortunate. It's so unfortunate. The life expectancy of Black transgender women, who put it in the chat, what you think the life expectancy of Black transgender women is?
I don't know, 40.
Anybody, the audience?
But they can send it through the chat.
Age.
Yeah, they can send that through the chat.
Got 21, you said 40, 20. The life expectancy of Black transgender women is 35.
Oh, wow.
My friend just turned, I think he turned 38, and he is considered an elder at 38. And Black trans women are murdered at rates that are unseen in any other gender category.
I'm actually going to that's actually going to be my next question, but I'm going to hold off on that for a second. I swear you're reading my mind, but we're definitely going to get to that one. But the reason that I ask about the enforced acceptance, I'm going to give you a personal example of something that I went through. I was at a bar with some coworkers, some buddies. One of my buddies was leaving the company and I had never heard of the they, them, their description.
Mm-hmm.
So someone said to me, "Hey, this person, they're a they." Again, I had never heard of it, so I thought that they were kidding.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, so I said, "So are they they?" So we're cracking jokes back and forth because again, I didn't know. Someone else who was at the bars comes and yells at me and says, "You can't say that. You can't joke about that." And my first question is, first off, who were you and why are you talking to me?
Mm-hmm.
And their response, well, there are coworkers at this bar, even though it's after work, and
Mm-hmm.
this is an extension of the workplace. So
Mm-hmm.
by you joking about that, you can lose your job.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that in certain cases that goes too far.
Mm-hmm.
That if you joke about it, you can lose your job. If you say that you disagree with the lifestyle, you have to go away. You know, I'm a big believer in freedoms. I'm a big believer of you believe whatever you want to believe as long as what you believe doesn't hurt anyone. I've always believed that. But in certain ways, if you don't accept the lifestyle, you have to go away. If you say, you know what, I disagree with this, you have to go away. You're transphobic. If you say, you know what, yeah, I think that this is wrong, you have to go away, or you can lose your job for that. Do you feel that that's right? That society or that companies are doing that?
Mm-hmm. I think I think it's twofold. I mean, it's a little bit more complicated than a yes or no, right?
Mm-hmm,
Because the reality is that a lack of use of proper pronouns, a
mm-hmm,
lack of use of proper names, chosen names is
mm-hmm,
grounds for a person being murdered. Point blank. That's the reality of being LGBTQ, right? Is
mm-hmm,
grounds for murder. I know several LGBTQ people who have been misgendered in
mm-hmm,
public, and people, circles of people that they have been messing around with or whatever, and then they come up missing. That's the reality of why these things are important. It's not about somebody being forced or anything like that. It's a matter of life and death for LGBT people, right? Yeah, you might see Ellen or Wanda Sykes on TV or Laverne Cox, but the reality on the ground is not the same for them, for everyday LGBTQ folks, right? Even me, you know, I I still get scared sometimes where I'm like, oh, where some folks, if they see me, right, they might gender me as male and say, hi, sir. I'm sweating
mm-hmm,
because if they look down and they see my breast and now they just called me male, I might have to go into a fight. It's not flight, a fight stance with them because of my identity, right? So it's not something to joke about when the reality on the ground is that misgendering folks can be life or death, right? And I think that's a little bit different. I think that that's where LGBTQ kind of departs from race, and that, like, yeah, in certain communities you can't walk in as a Black person, we know that, but for the most part Black folks can go wherever the hell they want to go, right? Today, in this day and age, right?
mm-hmm. I can't.
In a way, but for largely LGBTQ folks, it's not
Mm-hmm,
the case. Is not the case. We can't move in certain ways, we can't present in certain ways, because in 2020, yes, it's not the case, right? So that's where,
mm-hmm.
like, certain things are not meant to be joked about, right? It's
But can
analogous to, like, you know, like a white person being in a thing and making jokes about Black monkeys and all of that. You don't want that to happen. So why is it okay for a past to be there to joke about someone's pronouns? It's not okay.
but I think that the question would be, shouldn't that more be seen as a teachable moment instead of saying you have to go away? Because in that situation that I'm speaking of, I had never heard of that. Again, there are a lot of people that are still getting used to the whole LGBT lifestyle, still getting used to the pronouns. There's still a lot that I don't know.
Mhm.
And I was annoyed with that person that they even came to me the way that they did and told me, well, you can't say that. My thing was, well, who are you to talk to me? I don't know you. Get out of my face. which if I were a different person could have soured me against the whole thing. But someone else pulled me to the side and said, well, actually, no, that's the way that someone identifies themselves. And I said, oh, okay. I was able to understand it at that point. But I think that in certain cases, it's this, this view that you have to, it's almost as if you should already know. You can't crack a joke about this. I don't care that this is how you've been your entire life. You have to change right now. And if you don't, you have to go away. And that's even with jobs. I think that that's kind of the disconnect. Again, I think that it's almost like it's forced. It's like you can't feel differently. It's kind of like when Caitlyn Jenner came out, and people said, "Isn't Caitlyn Jenner sexy?" And then when someone said, "No," oh, you're transphobic. No, I just don't think that a 60-year-old woman is sexy.
Yeah.
Not
Yeah.
to say all 60-year-olds, but I just happen to not think that that one is sexy. That
Yeah.
doesn't necessarily make me transphobic. I think that one of the things that will move both communities, whether it be the straight or LGBT communities, is that we have to understand each other. And I think that both sides are trying to force each other to accept each other.
Hmm.
And this LGBT movement it's really gained steam over the past few years. It really has, and it's still a lot for a lot of people to digest. And again, there are people that do not agree with it.
Hmm.
At the end of the
But
day, there are.
the reality is that it's not a new movement. Like we
Hmm.
teach history in silos. The
Hmm.
LGBTQ movement was going on at the same time that the civil rights movement was going on.
Hmm.
Literally,
Hmm.
the rolling 60s, it was happening for everybody. Feminists, LGBTQ folks, Black folks, everybody was at the
Hmm.
front of it. And the
Hmm.
reality, if we want to talk about the reality, the civil rights movement was crafted by a Black gay man,
Hmm.
Bernard Weston,
Hmm.
right? So this is
Hmm.
new. A Black gay man, Quaker, you know,
Hmm.
Quaker, that was his religious identity, crafted the civil rights movement that we so quote every single day, but yet folks don't even give Bayard Rustin his just due, right? So
Hmm.
I have to, it's not a new movement. And I think LGBTQ folks is similarly like Black folks in terms of Black folk in the relationship between Black folks and white folks is like, we're tired of educating you on things that you can educate yourself on. Like it's not the responsibility of a Black person to teach a white person about racism, right? And white privilege. Similarly, it's not the responsibility of the LGBTQ person, especially with the access that we have now. You could go to Google and pull up anything, right? To
Hmm.
learn, but that's the privilege, right? Of being a heterosexual. That's the privilege of being a cis person that you don't have. You can move throughout the world and not even have to think about the LGBTQ community until you are faced with it, right?
The,
But
the,
not
mm,
our reality. Our reality is that we're facing homophobia and transphobia every day. We see it just like the Black person sees the racism every single day. Whereas the white person is like, oh my God, this is so new. Racism exists. Well, you had a Black president. You got a Black vice president. What the heck? Racism doesn't exist. But we know
mm.
that's not true.
Well, again, some people don't understand it because of the way that they grew up. Like I know of someone that grew up in a very affluent neighborhood, and when he speaks about the Black Lives Matters movement, he's a white guy, and we would
Mhm.
speak about the Black Lives Matters thing. He would say, "Yeah, this George Floyd thing is terrible," and he said, "Yeah, it's bad. I've heard about things." And I'd ask him, "Hey, have you ever heard of Amadou Diallo?" He said, "No, no."
Mhm.
Have you ever heard of Abner Louima? No. You ever
Mhm.
heard of Sean Bell? No.
Mhm.
So his
Mhm.
views on Black Lives Matters is that it's overblown, it's too blown out.
Mhm.
Um, and I took that as an opportunity to educate him
Mhm.
instead of just saying, what, you have to go away. You're wrong. You're racist. You need to do your research. Because by me saying that, I know that would turn him against what I'm trying to get him to understand. But when I
Mhm.
gave him those names and I explained to him, okay, this is Amadou Diallo's story. This is the story of Abner Louima. This is the story of Sean Bell. He said, oh,
Mhm.
wow. And then he started to research more.
Mhm.
I think that that's something that needs to happen. That's part of why we're doing the show.
Mm-hmm.
Um, again, it's being LGBT isn't new, but a lot of the pronouns were not mainstream. A lot of the descriptions were not mainstream, as we even spoke about in Black households. These things weren't mainstream, so a lot of people are still getting used to it. So I think that we have to learn how to be ambassadors to each other. We need to learn how
Mm-hmm.
to educate each other. I think that's the point. And you know what? A big thing is if we disagree on each other's lifestyles, we should just leave it as just a disagreement.
Mm-hmm.
Like I said, the reason that I brought it up is again, you can lose your job now for just saying that I disagree with this.
Mm-hmm.
I know of someone that I'm very close to that was almost fired because they said that they are a pastor and they disagree with the LGBT lifestyle,
Mm-hmm.
and they almost lost their job for that
Mm-hmm.
just because they said they disagree. They said I feel that this is an abomination. I feel that this is a sin against God. I disagree with it, and that person almost lost their job because of that. So do you feel that again? Do you feel that at times they sometimes take it a little bit too far?
It depends on the instance. Like I mean, people could disagree, whatever. Like
Sure.
racist white folks should. I mean, some people might say no, but racist white folks have the right to exist in this world, right?
Hmm.
Really, homophobic, transphobic folks have the right to exist in this world, right?
Hmm.
There's a difference, right?
Hmm.
If he's just if he's like willingly going up and down the halls of the job, with known out LGBTQ folks and like telling them to their face they're abomination and things like that, that's different. But if you're
Yeah.
coming to work doing your job and you go home, that's different, right? Like if you're actually acting out on your racism or acting out on your transphobia or your homophobia, then yes,
Hmm.
absolutely.
Well, let me clarify a little bit more. Let's just say someone were to come to them and say, "Hey, how do you feel about the LGBT community?" I disagree with it. I feel it's an abomination. Do you feel that that person should be fired for that, or do you feel that they should just say, "Okay, well, you have an opinion. Okay, that's it."
Yeah,
And this is what was brought
I
to
mean,
me by this
essentially
person.
what I said, if that's just your opinion, that's your opinion, whatever. But if
Hmm.
you're beginning to act out on that opinion, then that's a different
Hmm.
conversation.
Oh yeah, I think
I know
we're actually in
people
agreement on it.
who I know people who have openly, had an opinion. Like there were jobs that I used to work at where people openly had an opinion about Black folks, and it
Hmm.
was like whatever. But until
Yeah.
they put a monkey in somebody's locker, then that's when you
Then
get
yeah.
scared.
Well, yeah, yeah. I think that we're
You
actually in
know,
agreement on that.
yeah.
I think that we actually just bridged the gap already, just on one of our differences of opinion. So, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, I definitely agree with that. Next, we're going to tap into something that we were talking about a few moments ago about the
But
whole
let me
transgender.
take that. Hold on. Let me take that a step further, right?
Sure. Okay.
But I think similarly to um if you're in a place of power is also
Mhm.
different as well, right?
Okay.
Like for example, if you're the president, vice president of an organization and these are your opinions, but people in
Hmm.
the organization is like, hey, we want to support LGBTQ pride or something like that, and now you're using your power to vote down people like the constituents of your organization, then that is something that we have to have a conversation about that person being removed,
Yeah.
because you're one person using your power to subjugate other people who support this community.
Yeah. Yeah.
But if you're an everyday employee and that's just your opinion, then that's different.
Hmm.
But and that's the insidious nature of discrimination. That's the
Hmm.
insidious nature of, homophobia and transphobia. While you may not even, a person that you may not even know could be using their power, like an applicant, they might sense that they're LGBTQ, they're qualified, but you're like,
Hmm.
I don't really feel it. I'm not really okay with this person's lifestyle, or they might be a little bit more of a feminine man or whatever. And you're like, they're gay. And you find another reason not to hire them because of
Hmm.
an opinion that you have, right?
Hmm.
And usually that's actually what happens. That's why LGBTQ folks have some of the highest rates of unemployment because of that
Hmm.
highest nature of discrimination and subjugation.
Mhm.
So we have to also talk about that too. And that's part of the reason why it could be dangerous for
Mhm.
people within organizations to have certain opinions. Because I mean,
Mhm.
and I bring in race because that's the same formula that's used as to why Black people have some of the highest rates of unemployment, right? Black women,
Mhm.
the most educated racial group in this country, but have
Mhm.
highest rates of unemployment because of that internalized or institutionalized racism. And this is another example of institutionalized homophobia and transphobia.
I actually agree. I'm against institutionalized racism, transphobia. I'm definitely against all of it. I mean, I've been in situations where I've had to deal with institutional racism. I've actually been in a situation where I had a person in power say to me while I was applying for a position, "This will not be some affirmative action hire," while
Mhm,
mentioning the fact that the previous hires, their belief was that they were all hired because they weren't enough Black people in the department, not because they
mhm,
were qualified. So
mhm,
I get it. Yeah, if you're using your opinions for that, then yeah, you should be removed. But I think that we're in agreement that
yeah,
just having an opinion, doesn't help you, and that we should make more of an effort to just educate each other, talk to each other, and not necessarily react first. So I
mhm,
think that we're kind of in agreement on that one.
mhm,
We're going to get into the whole transgender lifestyle. You touched on it a few moments ago about the violence against transgendered individuals.
mhm,
Um, yeah, it's something that I'm against violence for anybody. Unless someone physically hurts you, you should not be harming them or killing them. And I think that we need to do something to stop it, to stop the violence. We need to change the mentality that it's okay to hurt someone that you disagree with, or because
mhm,
you disagree with their lifestyle.
mhm,
Um, again, that's something else that we agree on. But there's been a situation with someone brought up, because I have two shows. So on one of my other shows, someone brought up a situation where, if I'm trying to figure out the correct way to frame this, they feel that if you're dating someone, hypothetically, and you don't know that that person is transgender, and you get intimate with them, and you find out at that time, that may be traumatizing for them. And I know that that is the cause of certain transgender deaths. Do you feel that people that are transgender, or actually, when do you feel that someone that is transgender should let their partner or someone that they're planning on becoming intimate with know that they're transgender?
mhm, mhm. So the first thing that I want to do is clear up that most Black trans women are not killed in the bed naked with their
Mhm.
partner, right?
Sure.
So them, that instance, a lot of times they're killed after being repeatedly involved with their cis Black male partner or cis partner, right?
Okay.
And it be in the secret being leaked.
Okay.
That's when it happens. Not it, because if that was the cause, then we would find most Black trans women in bed being shot, right? If that's
Hmm.
the
Hmm.
instance when it happened, that's where we will find most Black trans women. We don't. We find Black trans women in trash bags. We find Black trans
Hmm.
women in the Hudson River. That's where we find Black trans women. And this is after the secret is let out, where this man is, then uncovered as actually having feelings for a transgender person. So I would
Okay.
put the onus back on cis men, right? And dealing with, as Black cis men, dealing with your internalized toxic masculinity. So you got to take some responsibility for that. The responsibility on the trans community, right? Yes,
Hmm.
I do think as the relationship is developing, is it date one? No. But as the relationship is developing, then yes, there is something that needs to be disclosed, right?
Hmm.
And no, it should not be, you know, the night when you all are about to engage in sexual intimacy, right?
Hmm.
But as the relationship, as if you see the relationship developing, then yes, disclose.
Yeah, I think that that's something that's really important. I know of someone. I don't know this person personally, but I know of them. They were dating someone, and they didn't know that the person was trans. They didn't know that they were born male. They went to get intimate with the person, saw that they had the same appendages. They freaked out because this person was raped as a child by a male relative. They freaked out and they beat the trans person to death.
Mhm.
I disagree with murdering again anyone, um, unless they're trying to harm you or harm a family member.
Mhm.
But I understand why, not so much the murder part, but I understand why someone would have a lot of anger or feel some type of violation uh, in that type of situation. So I'm happy that you said that the onus is also on the trans community to bring that out, to bring that up ahead of time, because there are situations where that does happen, where they don't say anything and it's kind of shock the person. And, that's not good for anybody.
Mhm.
So
I
I'm really, really,
also, again, want to point out too, in that situation, the onus is also on the black man for not dealing with the fact that, for not dealing with the fact that he was raped, right? So now we
mhm,
internalize masculinity and a fear that's driving an anger, right? That
mhm,
all actually didn't have to happen if he did his work, and
mhm,
into therapy to talk about, how his raping impacted him as a black man, right?
mhm,
That black men, are socialized into like holding emotions and being hard and not really getting that out, that he
mhm,
probably had been embarrassed. I mean, I used to be an HIV counselor, and I remember the first time a black man, I didn't know what to do with it because he disclosed to me for the first time that he was raped when I asked him if he,
mhm,
ever had same-sex relationships. That was a common question we asked, during the HIV interview, right? I,
mhm,
I was young. I was in my early 20s. I didn't know what to do with that information. I gave him a
mhm,
hug and said,
mhm,
thank you, but I didn't know what to do with that, right?
mhm,
But
mhm,
so yes, it's two people that unfortunately the black trans woman is not able to take responsibility for her part, but this black man should have also taken responsibility for his part and the healing that he needed or may still need to do, right? And
mhm,
that's a lot of times we talk about this one fold. The conversation is usually on trans people. Y'all got to disclose. This is wrong. This is that. But we're not talking about
mhm,
what's driving the murders from the black trans men. I mean, excuse me, from the black men,
mhm,
right? And it's also that rage within black men also has to be addressed. Like there's no amount of rage that should push you to beat somebody down or shoot somebody. That's a different,
mhm,
y'all work. That's a different conversation.
mhm. Well, I was actually in a situation on a bus. Being that we both lived in the same town, we were both familiar with the same area. I was on a 25 bus coming from downtown Newark during rush hour. So you know how crowded that bus gets.
Yes.
It's on shoulder to shoulder. Uh, and on that bus, there were about 4 or 5 transgender, I guess, women, or I guess they were drag queens. They were on the bus and they were flirting with all of the men on the bus, which, whatever, I just put my headphones in because I didn't want to hear it. And another thing that they were doing is they were grinding on the men as they walked past. They were literally, you know how the back staircase is on that bus. It's pretty tight. And when it's
Mhm,
crowded on that bus, someone stands on it. So they
mhm,
would they would grind on the men when they got past, or they would twerk on the men when they got past,
mhm,
when they were walking past. In a situation like that, I guess when I got up, they moved out of my way because I guess I had a look on my face like, you better not touch me, because I don't like
mhm,
people touching me in general if I don't know you.
mhm, mhm,
Um, but in a situation like that, I wouldn't have been surprised if someone would have punched them in the back of their heads. And then
mhm,
odds are they probably would have been charged with a hate crime
mhm,
for punching someone that's transgender. So I think that in a situation like that, the onus would have been on them. I don't think that the onus would have been on men or on toxic masculinity. I think that the onus should have been on them for grinding on men as they're getting off the bus.
mhm.
How do you feel about that?
So again, I look at it two ways, right?
Sure.
It
Mhm.
the reality is that it's because it's trans women. If those were four cis
Mhm.
men, it would have been, hey, they probably would have been dancing, gyrating as they're walking off the bus too, right?
Not necessarily.
But let's be real. If they heterosexual men, they would have been like, okay, okay, sweet thing or whatever, as those girls are exiting off the bus. So we have to address the fact, what's the fear with trans women, right? So that's number one, because the underlying fear is that trans women are men, but trans women are not men. Trans women are trans women. Men are men, right? So that's number one, is this under this fear that like, oh, a man is twerking on me. No, a trans woman is twerking on you, right? They
So I,
just happen to be assigned male at birth, but now their identity is a transgender woman, right? Which
I,
I believe, and people can disagree, I believe that transgender women are women, period. That's my belief, and I own that, okay? So now, but we still have, again, two things that we have to talk about. Yes, the trans women were in violation. You violated people's personal space. Clear.
mhm.
I agree with that. Comma, and as Black men, you have agency over your bodies to express a clear boundary.
Mhm.
And I'm assuming these men did not express a clear boundary by saying, excuse me, please do not touch me. Please do not, twerk on me, you know,
Mhm.
didn't express a clear boundary.
Well, again, it's a crowded bus. So I think they're just trying to run off the bus just to get off. Just you know how the buses are. You got to run off because sometimes they'll close that door and pull off while you're getting off. So I think that they were just trying to just run off the bus. And again, they were grinding on them. And you say this because there's transgender, but I have a rule. I have a one penis in a room at a time rule. Well, I try to have that. Like I don't want someone else with a penis touching me at all. That's just my personal views. Like even when I go to the locker room in the gym, a lot of older men like to talk to you with the penises out because they're older guys. I personally don't like that. Personally, my thing is, hey, put some pants on, and then we can talk.
Yeah, that's
That
expressing a boundary.
yeah, that's just my personal preference. But I think that when you're grinding on these men, like forcibly, like forcing yourself literally onto these men and grinding on them, you're creating an issue. But here's the problem: if one of those men, if let's just say I would have reacted, if I would have pushed that person off of me, if I would have punched them for touching me, I would have gone to jail and I would have been charged with a hate crime, even though they violated me. That was at the end of the day, that's a violation. Because let's flip it. What if you had women getting off of the bus and you had men grinding on them? Will we still be having the same conversation
Like,
about the women have to establish these boundaries?
yes, when people need to establish boundaries for their own agency, you are responsible for your own agency. If you don't want something to happen to your body, we as people
Mhm,
have to express that, right?
mhm,
But because we have these, and this goes back to our conversations with parents and children, right? We learn inherently that we don't really have agency over our own bodies because of whatever conversations we may have had in childhood with our
mhm,
parent, right? And that's why a little bit disagree in terms of, these are like shows that have been consulted with psychologists, shows that have been consulted with child psychologists about how do we get appropriate messages across. But here is the conversation, right? Like
mhm.
if anybody violates your agency, then yes, they are wrong. However, if you weren't going to punch a cis woman in her face for gyrating on you, there's no reason why you should punch a trans woman in her face. You can say, yo, excuse me, I don't appreciate that, and keep it moving.
Mhm.
Make the correction and keep it moving. But the fact that punching someone is an option, it says more about the person than it does about the actual trans person, right? Because again, we have to talk about this idea of like trans women are men, but that's not necessarily the case. Trans women are not men. Yes, they were assigned male at birth, but they are, in my opinion, this is my opinion, right? That trans women
Mhm.
are women, right? They are women. They're living their lives as women, right? So if you're not going to punch a cis woman in her face for gyrating on you, then you shouldn't punch a trans woman. All you need to say is, yo, chill out, and establish the boundary, and they could have gone across their way. Or like, yo, I'm not with that, right? You don't disrespect them or nothing, but establish the boundary. Yo, I'm not with that. Keep it moving. And that's
Yeah, this is another one that's going to come up in a Q&A. I already know it. So we're going to skip ahead a little bit. We're going to go to trans children. I know that Zaya Wade has been in the news. I hope that I'm getting the name right. Dwayne Wade's child has been in the news because I believe that Dwayne Wade's child has come out as transgender, and I believe that they're 12 years old. Again, I could be wrong about the ages, and a lot of people took a lot of flack because they disagree with the lifestyle. They feel that that's too young to be allowed to be transgender. My major issue with it is that, if you're going to have a child, don't put them on social media. That's just children in general. But what age do you think that a child should be allowed to start to transition?
And this is where I kind of depart from I guess you could say mainstream ideas, right?
Okay.
I will say this. I think that children should have the ability to express themselves, because that's what children are doing. They're exploring the world. They're, very tactile, like they're exploring the world. So express yourself in any way that may be, right? I'm fine with that. Like, be you, right? If you want to be called unicorn today, I'm gonna call you unicorn today, right? That's you expressing yourself. That's you. When it comes to actually transitioning, okay? So let me break that down, right? There are three different areas of transition, right? The medical transition, actually, well, really two areas. There's medical transition, and then there's social transition, right?
Okay.
Social transition is like changing your name, using different pronouns, right? Dressing differently, things like that. Transitioning your presentation to the world. Absolutely think kids should be able to socially transition, right? If you want to be called unicorn, I'll call you unicorn. If you want to dress like a unicorn, I dress you like a unicorn. That's fine. You're a kid. You're exploring. Medical transition, for me, it's a little bit more difficult to agree with medically transitioning a child, right? Or a person. Because let's talk about what medical transitioning looks like, right? For a person who was assigned female at birth, right? And now to transition to becoming a man, that looks like taking testosterone, right? So that you stop your periods. So that looks like taking testosterone, possibly, most people can stop there, but possibly getting a hysterectomy, right? If people who are older, you eventually have to get a hysterectomy, right? That means top surgery, which is removing your breast, right? So as a child, you overlay that with puberty, right? So now you're taking testosterone, and I'm also not a doctor, so let me put that out there, right? But you're taking testosterone and you haven't gone through puberty, so now you actually will develop as a boy, right? Because if you take testosterone before you have the first mints, like, you can actually change the way in which you develop, right? It becomes irreversible, right? So what happens if after a while you're like, I want to detransition? There's some people who detransition, right? They actually go to the sex assigned at birth, which is fine.
Mm,
Now you have the irreversible capacity to do so, right? Because
mm,
you started to transition before you hit puberty,
mm,
to where your body hasn't fully developed as a female, right? And like
mm,
as a male, if we flip it, right? So I'm
mm.
okay with that. Me personally,
Okay.
right? I as a parent, if I were a parent, all day, I will allow for my kid to socially transition. We go down to
Mm,
the house, you want to change your name to Unicorn, I'm with it. But
mm.
we will have to talk a little bit more about the medical transitioning and what that looks like, right? Because
Okay.
there would be some level of irreversibility that I don't think that 12-year-old child can make that decision, in my opinion.
Okay. All right. Good. 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 Yeah, that was a big one that had been mentioned. There was a rapper, Bootsy, and he
Mhm.
made a comment about Dwayne Wade's. I'm trying to make sure that I say it right. Daughter, I believe it is considered to be his daughter now, and he pretty much made a comment about, "Oh, don't let him cut his thing off. Don't let him cut his thing off. He's 12. He's 12."
Mhm.
And I mean, he may have had a cruel way of saying it, but I understand why Bootsy said what he said. No, you're too young to be making those types of decisions.
Mhm.
Um, you know, I think
I
that
was- uh,
okay.
I wanted to add something too. Um,
Mm,
and I will say this though, that decision is also a struggle, right?
yeah.
Because if your child in fact knows that they are trans and they don't want to be in this body that they were assigned
Hmm.
at birth, exactly. Larita says in the conversation, I was just about in the chat, I was just about to get there. That can
Hmm.
lead to years of mental health trauma for a kid, right? So,
Hmm.
and that's why LGBTQ kids often have some of the highest rates of suicide, because especially in trans kids, because it's like my body is developing in a way that I know does not fit with who I am, and I know this as a kid. So it's really it's a struggle for parents, and thank God I'm not a parent right now, because
Hmm.
my heart goes out to parents who have to make that decision with their kids.
Hmm.
You because it is a hard decision. It's like on one hand, I'm like, I don't want my kid to medically transition because I know the impact that this will have in terms of irreversibility, right? But on the other hand, I don't want to subjugate my kid to years of mental health trauma to the point where they ultimately commit suicide, which is the ultimate end result, right? Yes, many kids
Hmm.
get through it, right? But then
Hmm.
how do I, as a parent, if that becomes the outcome of my child, how do I hold that? Because all that I had to do was let my child be who they wanted to be,
Hmm.
prevent them from committing suicide as the ultimate goal, right? Like not the ultimate,
Hmm.
as the worst outcome, I should say,
Sure. 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 Sure.
right?
Hmm.
So that's hard. And my heart goes out to parents who are struggling with that. But I do think that there are behavioral health professionals. I do think that there are medical professionals that can support parents through those conversations.
Hmm.
With their kids.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Well, I'm a big proponent of therapy. If you've seen any one of my episodes, I've mentioned it at least 3 times in every episode. So I think that in situations like that, people should go. They should get therapy. They
Mhm.
should really, go seek professional help, especially if you're struggling with things like that.
Mhm.
Um, I have a couple more questions, and then we're going to open it up for Q&A.
Mhm.
Uh, I'm going to go back to when we first described the different letters for LGBTQ.
Yep.
Uh, can you give a definition again of what someone that's transgender is, like what it means to be transgender?
Yeah. So
Hmm.
transgender means across gender, right? For
Okay.
trans folks, they do not identify with the sex assigned at birth and all
Okay.
the gender expressions and performance of that sex assigned sex assigned at birth, right?
Okay.
For example, and this is how I teach my students, right? A
Mm,
transgender man or a
mm,
trans man, right? That man signifies what they've transitioned from. Okay. So if they're
okay.
a man, then they transition from being a female or a woman to becoming a man. A transgender woman or a trans woman signifies that they've transitioned from being assigned male at birth to now becoming a woman. Okay.
Okay.
That's essentially what that means. There are other folks who are also like trans masculine, which means
Okay.
they, they might identify as a woman or maybe not, most likely not, but they really
Hmm.
identify more so with like masculinity, or trans feminine, they identify with femininity, right? Um,
Okay.
so that's essentially what it means, like across gender, transitioning across gender.
So is it kind of like you were born in one body, but you just don't feel that that represents who you are?
Exactly.
Okay. Uh, do you feel that there are certain rights or protections that trans members of the trans community need?
Absolutely.
Uh, what are some of them?
Number one being employment protection, right?
Okay.
I think the Supreme Court just voted that like trans folks cannot be fired for being trans. I'm actually not too sure. I do think
Okay.
it came out, but if that is true, prior to that, in majority of the United States, you can get fired for being trans, right?
Okay.
Also need more, and people might disagree, but more strict hate crime laws, right? Like no one should walk away from killing trans folks, right?
Mhm.
I would also say more laws to protect trans folks from having access to education, and
Okay.
really just the ways of life, right? Like many trans folks do not have college degrees.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I asked that to ask this. This was actually something that was brought up to me recently.
Mhm.
Um, have you heard of this growing transracial community? Uh, Rachel Dolezal, Jessica Krug. These are individuals that feel that they were born the wrong race. There's a rapper, I can't think of his name right now, who actually got his skin permanently darkened because he feels that he's a black man, but he was born uh, as the wrong race. Do you feel that they deserve protections similar to what transgender individuals get?
Honestly, my personal opinion, that's a bunch of malarkey, as Joe Biden would say. In my
Okay.
right, and I may be
Hmm.
wrong, right? Um,
Hmm.
but yeah, that's yeah, because the reality is it overshadows and really makes fun. To my in my opinion, this is what I feel about it. I feel like transracial is intended to like make fun of the trans community and like how silly our decision to like want to live our lives as the gender in which we feel as though we are um is. And I just don't agree with that, because you can't, there's nothing that you could say to me that, at 5, 6, 7 years old, you're like, oh my God, I feel like I'm a white woman.
Hmm.
Nothing that you can, I don't know, maybe this is my closed-mindedness, you know,
Hmm.
I will own that if it is, but
Hmm.
I don't know, I don't agree with it.
See, I ask because I believe that Jessica Krug had been transracial for the past 10 years, had actually become I believe, an African American studies professor and in charge of that department at, I believe that it was George Washington University. And then you have someone like Rachel Dolezal, who became the head of the NAACP in her home state
Mhm.
after being transracial. And again, there's this rapper, again, his name escapes me, who actually got surgery to changed his facial features to look black, and had surgery to permanently darken his skin because he says that he does not feel that he is a white man. He feels that he is black, and he got the surgery to prove it.
All right, let me know. Let me know how he feels once he's accosted by the police.
Well, they probably will because he kind of looks black because again he had the surgery to look black.
Mm.
Again, got his nose done, got his skin darkened. Uh, you know, wears his hair in cornrows, raps, says the N word like it's no tomorrow. And then in an interview, he actually admitted, like, I was actually born white. I was born as a white man. I feel that I can use the N word because, again, I'm transitions. I've had surgery. I'm black.
I don't know. It's just my opinion. It could be my
Sure, sure.
closeness. If so, I own it, you know, but
I get it. I get it. All right. One final question before I open it up to the Q&A. What can we do to bridge the gap of understanding between the straight world and the LGBT uh, communities?
mm. um honestly, I would say get to know LGBTQ folks, right?
Mhm.
We get to know us like, I mean, yeah, we're people like anybody else, but you know, that's just it. We're people. Like there's nothing
Sure, sure.
wrong with our relationships, who we are, you know, we're people much like straight heterosexual cisgender people. Like
Hmm.
and getting to know us, you also learn that we're nothing to be feared,
Okay.
right? Because we're regular smegular, as Cardi B would say, regular
Hmm.
smegular regular human beings. You know,
Hmm. Hmm. Hmm.
that's it.
Mm. Okay.
That's right. Like you know, have a conversation and just
Hmm.
get to know us and who we are, right? And our story. As you will see in terms of how I paralleled the similarities, especially as we particularly talk about like the Black community, there are many similarities
Hmm.
across both fights. And when you really think about it, when you really take a step back, right?
Hmm.
You gotta ask yourself, are people really choosing to be subjugated to both racism and homophobia? Like who would really sign up for that?
Hmm.
like like you all know the weight of racism every day, right? Now you compound that with homophobia and transphobia. Do you think people will really want to choose that lifestyle? No, this is who people are, and just accepting that this is who we are, right?
Hmm.
Yeah, that's it.
Oh, all right. All right. Well, first off, thank you for coming on. Uh, this has been months in the making. I really, really appreciate you for coming on. I'm hoping that people learn something
Mhm,
uh, from this.
mhm,
What we're going to do is we're going to open it up for Q&A.
mhm,
One second. I'm sorry. I'm going to open it up for Q&A. Just a few ground rules. For one, Professor Douglas is our guest. I really, really appreciate her for being here. So let's keep the questions or comments classy and respectful. That is a big, big thing. We are here to learn from each other. If you have a question or a comment, the format that we use is you use the hand raise option. If you don't know how to do that, there should be three dots on either the top or bottom of your screen that should say more. Once you click more, it should say raise hand. Jalen already started. If that doesn't work, you can type your question in the chat. And if all else fails, you can take yourself off of mute and just let me know that you have a question, and then we'll acknowledge you. So,
mhm.
all right, wow, we've already got hands up. All right, so the first question is from Jalen.
Hey, good evening. How are you?
Hey.
Mm,
First, I would like to say that it takes a real courageous person to come on here and talk about something that's so sensitive. um, as this is. Now, please forgive me. I do not know you've taught me so much. I was actually texting Larita that's on here, telling her that you have just opened my eyes to something that I had no idea. I really had no idea. I do not follow um, the LG. I don't even know. I'm not even going to sit here and lie to you and act like I know what the acronyms are, what the letters are, because I do not. I am a trans male, and I don't follow anyone. I just want to live my own life and be happy because I see everyone as everyone being human. I don't look at black, white, gay. I do not look at that. And it took me 40 years to get to this point as to where I am today. So I really, let me tell you, you taught me so much today. So I want to thank you for that. Because maybe I need to maybe look into it a little bit. I mean, it really isn't a disagreement because we can all have our own opinions. The only thing I definitely agreed with the child expressing themselves. I have children, and I would most definitely want my child to sit there and express themselves wholehearted. It doesn't, at the young age or whatever. I would never stop them from doing that. I too would battle if my child said, "Hey, I want to be like you. I want to change everything." It would be very, very difficult for me. And at the age when I started transitioning, it was going on about little almost 3 years now. I had to, even me at the age of 37, I had to go see therapists and see a whole bunch of um, doctors. And they were like, "Are you sure this is something that you want to go through?" And I'm like, I mean, I would think so. I live my life as this. And I knew I say it's unfortunate. I was one of those children that at the age of 4 or 5 battled with myself. I knew that I knew that I knew that I was a man. I knew that I knew it. It was something that I saw. And at the age, back in the early 80s, you know, you could dress however girls, TLC dressed with the baggy clothes and all this other stuff. So it really didn't come out until I was like 15 and I was battling and battling and battling with myself. Would I ever want my child to go through that? No. But at least I'm truly grateful that I waited I mean, I'm grateful now that I'm able to do that. I've done it, but I wouldn't want my child to go through that. I would really, it's the conversations that you're having behind closed doors for me, with the child, most definitely be open and just letting them know, listen, are you sure? How about we just wait? But most definitely if they want to call themselves unicorn, I'm down because at the end of the day, there's for me, my personal opinion, there is no black, white. I don't believe in that. Just like, with the gentleman he considered himself black and using the N-word. I do not agree with that word, period. It's not a term of endearment. I don't like when it's said, so there's a lot of things that I too, um, I disagree with. Just the one thing was on the movie, and this has nothing to do. Someone brought it up to me the other day and was telling me about the movie. I've never seen the movie, but I don't. It goes for whether you're gay, you're straight, you're heterosexual. I don't know the terms again, but I think across the board, if you're going to have something on TV or you're going to make a movie, I think it should be known, me per se, because I want to be able to, I want my child to know because it is out there, but I want them to know, listen, okay, there's this little, if they see the warning sign or whatever, whether it be someone if there's a trans, heterosexual, anything, because that's how I've raised my children, and again, I've raised them because in my mind, you and I, the things that you're making me think about now, I never thought, I didn't really think of. So you really opened up my mind now because I just have an open mind and I'm now starting at the age of 40 to pardon. I'm sorry. My wife just,
I'm sorry.
just walked in the, so sorry, but okay. Thank you. But I would want them to know first, cause I watch, I make sure that like my kids are older now, but when they were kids, I'm like, you're not going to watch that, because I would watch it first and not there are adults, there are parents that don't do that. They don't watch it. They just let the child watch whatever it is that they want. But I really watch. I pay attention to everything that my children are watching to make sure, yes, you will see it. However, when it comes to this household, I just want it. Let us have the conversation first, because I want my child to have an open mind. Because as I was growing up, I was closed-minded, like nobody's business. But now, as I get older, and now I'm free, I am the man that I knew that I was when I was younger. So now I just want to live my life and just be happy. So again, I just want to thank you. That was the only thing, and it wasn't a disagreement. We're allowed to, disagree, but that was the only thing. You've taught me so much, and I really truly am grateful that you came on and you were able to just, voice your opinion on what it was that your beliefs. And maybe one day you and I could just sit down, not right now because there's a whole virus outside, but maybe one day we can sit down and just talk, and you could teach me some more, because there are things that I didn't know. As far as that other story, real quick, about the gentleman, what were they on the bus story?
Yeah. Yes.
They were men, right? Or they were women?
They were, I guess they would be drag queens or transgender women. I guess that's what they would be considered.
Okay, so here's my ignorance. So you're gonna see my ignorance a little bit. But when I was first told the story, I was like, they would get so punched in the face, because I had to step back and then say, wait, is that really the right thing? You know what I mean? Because it's not. If it were me, because I have seen it both ways. I have seen heterosexuals do it, which it wasn't right, and people allowed it. So I completely agree with, listen, if you just say, yo, I don't like you touching me like that, because I say it now, do not touch, do not come around. I do not like hugs. I don't like being touched. I don't like anybody behind me. I just, I've been in the military now for 20 years, and I just don't like it. So people don't do it. So if that were to happen to me, just they would get known that. So having to step back and take a look at the whole situation, would I punch him in the face? No, but I would let them know, listen, what you're doing right now is kind of disrespecting me. So please give me my space and let me, because I don't want to be disrespected. And if you can't, then listen to what now we're going to revert back to what I just said. You know what I'm saying? But should it always turn to violence? No, it really shouldn't. Now I'm using my words more than having to use my hands, because there really isn't any. There's no need in having, and that's my personal opinion. Other people be like, you know what, I punch him in the face, and that's exactly the same mindset that I had until I really just took a step back and looked at the entire situation and said, would that? I mean, I wouldn't do it, but if I did, would I want to get punched in my face? A trans woman, to me, in my personal opinion, is a woman. Because it would be like you people saying to me, I'm not a trans man, I'm not a man. It's the same thing. And for me, it would be really hypocritical to come out and say a man isn't a man that is trans, a man that was born a man and now is a woman isn't a woman. So for me, I see it as, yes, it is a woman. At the very end of the day, my personal opinion is, you have to be in the situation in order to really truly understand what that person is feeling. Because I didn't feel that. I had that dysfunction or whatever it's called, but I did not like what I saw when I looked in the mirror.
Yeah.
And now, 3 years in, I love what I see. I love my person. It took me to come out of that. My children love me, my wife loves me, and I love who I am, with or without anybody else saying, oh, what you did was wrong. No, because I am Christian and all that, not to put my beliefs on anybody, but I am happy with who I am. And again, that's all I had. That was a lot long-winded answer, but again, I wanted to thank you so very much, and hopefully we could outside of this talk, so that you can talk to me a little bit more about this.
Yeah. No, I just wanted to take a moment to respond. Like, in terms of the Rocco's modern life and monitoring what children view. Yeah, absolutely. Parents monitor it, right? And at the same time, have to be careful about, the beliefs and things that we instill in children, right? Because I think there was someone in the chat that said that their a first grade schoolmate is already socially transitioned, right? The reality is that your kids are already exposed to this in the world,
Right.
regardless of whether or not you allow for that child to watch Rocco's Modern Life. They already are exposed to this in the world. But then you also have to think about what the outcome of the conversation could be, right? Can you imagine that first grader, someone's child now coming to that class after having a conversation about, homophobic and transphobic conversation at home, and now that first grader's first instance with transphobia, the year, like, compound that onto years of socially being rejected. Meanwhile, this show, and I'm assuming this show, the message was that, everybody should be accepted. They're a regular person. You know what I mean? I don't know. I just think about that. I think about what the impact is. And I also know that for many shows, again, they consult with child psychologists about how to message things and how to put things through to allow for kids to understand what's actually going on and is age appropriate, right? I think a lot of it is driven by fear. Like, I don't want my kid to be trans, so I need to turn this off, right? The reality is your kid already got 2 or 3 trans folks in his class or her class.
Mm.
I definitely hear what you're saying, and again, I do appreciate that. My personal opinion, I do realize, I do know, I am not naive to the fact that it is out there. It most definitely is, but I would like, and I would tell them, because I'm very, very open with my children, both of my boys and my girls, and I just explained to them how I was and how it felt for me. So I try to make it, I want them to see my side, but then they're gonna go out there and see it anyway, and see it through someone else's eyes or through their own eyes. I mean, if you will, yes, I would want them to hear it from home first. And I have not seen that movie. But again, if it were my personal opinion, I would just want something to be said before listen, just something. And this goes with anything. It just doesn't need to be with trans. It needs to be with, any, they have just so many different things. I think that children, they don't need to, that's not something that they should be learning about so soon, so early on in age. Yes, be yourself, but something like that. Maybe it's just that I don't know. I can't even.
If I can kind of interject with one more analogy to kind of bring it home, it's kind of like, imagine if you're watching like Bugs Bunny, hypothetically, Bugs Bunny, Daffy Duck, and then you take a character that had been in maybe one Bugs Bunny cartoon ever. So we've all seen Bugs Bunny, so we know what a Bugs Bunny cartoon is like. You kind of have an idea as to what to expect. And then they take this little known character and say, okay, well, I'm a Trump supporter. And now the movie, the Bugs Bunny and Daffy Duck movie, is now about this new character that is a Trump supporter, and is about Bugs Bunny and Daffy Duck accepting them as a Trump supporter.
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of why I say that I'm not against there being LGBT themes in movies. I'm not even. I love the show Rocko's Modern Life. I'm a huge fan of it. That's why I couldn't wait for the movie. But when I saw it, I was kind of taken aback. Say, all right, well, this is what you're going to show for 7-year-olds. It's kind of it. I think it kind of cheapened it, because I feel like they've wedged a character in there that either didn't exist or was rarely used, just to drive that point home, without necessarily, again, giving parents the option to say, hey, you know what? I want to discuss this on my own, or I don't want to discuss this in this way. That's kind of why I use the analogy of like a Trump supporter. Trump supporters exist, but you might not want your children exposed to that at such an early age. So again, if you want to have gay cartoons, have gay cartoons. You want to have transgender cartoons, have transgender cartoons. Great, but at least, again, give parents. I think that it's give them the opportunity. It's just to say, hey, you know what? We may be discussing these themes, and parents could just say, okay, cool. Well, let me sit down and let's talk about it. I mean, I remember when I was a kid, there were certain cartoons and they would say this cartoon has loaded with action and may have shootouts. So as a parent, you can say, okay, yeah, my kids aren't watching that.
Mhm.
So yeah. But did you have another response to Jalen's question? Because I know we still got people that
No,
have questions.
so let's go on with the questions.
Got it. Jalen, thanks.
All right, man.
Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, the next person is Queen Diva.
Hi. Hello.
Hi.
Hi. How are you? Okay. I'm really having a hard time understanding this. The situation on the bus.
Yes.
Okay. I know they were born male and they're now living their life as a female, but we still have to understand for those guys, they still see them as men, and we have to respect that. And you're saying that they should have set boundaries with them. I don't understand that part. Because to me, they didn't ask to be touched. They didn't ask to be twerked on or rubbed up on. They were violated.
Mhm.
They were totally disrespected. And we have to understand, I don't judge people how they want to live their life, but it's still a learning lesson for us too. And because I learned a lot today just by listening to you. I learned a lot. But when it comes to trend, that's something I'm still trying to adjust to, because to be honest, sometimes I don't even know what to say. He, she, it gets confusing for me. I'm still learning. You understand? So if I was a guy on that, a straight guy on that bus, and they did that, yes. And I know we always say, oh, we're not going to swing, but the first thing, we are human. That's going to be a reaction. And if somebody of the same sex is rubbing up on you, especially as a man, you're messing with his manhood. He's going to turn around and swing. So if these trans women are doing this to this man and he turn around and swing, they can't get mad because they violated him. They
Mhm.
violated those men. You don't. I'm sure you don't see it that way, right?
No, so okay, so before I actually go into that, I want to clarify something, okay?
Please do.
So James talks about whether these women were trans or drag queens. I want to make a distinction between the two.
Okay.
Drag queens are not transgender women. RuPaul is a gay man. His character is a woman it's a character, right? Angelina Jolie is not, her character Gia when she goes home at night, right? So drag queens are not actually in the transgender community. They're character.
Right.
They're men playing out a character. That's it. Okay. Now, so I wanted to make that distinction that, drag queens, cross dressers, they are not trans individuals unless they say that they are trans. There have been people on RuPaul's Drag Race who have transitioned. Now they're trans, right? But the majority of them are just men. Most of them are gay men who just put on characters of women. That's it. Okay. So I wanted to make that distinction. Secondly, I agree that the women, whether they're trans or whatever, they violated the men, right? However, I do not excuse the violence if it actually went to, one of them punching or whatever. I don't excuse that. I don't, because the reality is they would not have punched a cis woman in her face for doing the same thing, right? And the reasoning behind that is because men, society really sees trans women as men, but they are not men. You know what I mean? That's what's underscoring it, right? So if you can say, yo, sweetheart, chill, I don't appreciate that, to a cis woman, then you can do the same thing for a trans woman to establish a boundary and be like, yo, I'm not with that. Please don't, twerk on me.
But if I can,
You do that.
there is if I can, there is a slight flip side with that. I think that with most men, if a man were to see another man grinding on a woman and a woman was uncomfortable, that man will probably push that guy off or grab them away and say, "Get away from them." They don't
I
want you touching them.
disagree.
I've been in situations
I
like that
see
where
women all the time accosted by men and no one say anything. That's why we have a youth movement.
I've been on the bus before, and I've had situations.
The reality. That's why we have a YouTube movement. Okay.
Well, I'm not saying that it happens in every time, but I've been in situations where I had a guy on the bus that was accosting this woman. I said, "Hey, get away from him," because she was starting to like shirk in her seat because she was getting very, very uncomfortable with the way that he was speaking to her. That he moved closer and closer to her. So I kind of grabbed him and moved him away from her because that's just the way that I am. Because again, I felt like you were attacking someone. So, I think just as a man, that's just how I am. So for me to say that I would have hit someone that came too close to me, I think just as a man, it's the same mentality. I'm protecting myself the way that I would have protected someone else. Because if a man were to come at me and grind on me, I'd probably punch him in the face.
But the reality is the default doesn't have to be violence. That's
no.
Of toxic masculinity. You can do you have so many other options at your disposal to diffuse the situation than for it to be violence. And that's the issue with toxic masculinity, is that it tells men that it is okay to be violent when it's not. And that's the work of the man, right? That doesn't excuse the trans woman for violating the man. Yes, you had a violation, sis. You out of pocket, as they say in Philly, right? Like you had no business, they had no business, gyrating or whatever, twerking on the man. I do not excuse that. But the default is not violence. It is not. And is something that Black men or men in general have to do their own work, that violence is the default. It's not.
It's not, but it takes the proper training to understand that as human nature is an impulse reaction. And we are learning. We are learning because I was in a bar one time, Larita, and this guy was drunk and he was kind of like grabbing up on me and kind of like, coming up on me too close. And a guy came to my rescue and pushed him off.
Yep.
I've had
What's
situations
going
like that
on?
when guys push my rescue.
That's the good
Somebody's
word.
mic's on. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
So it does happen, but it's a learning lesson. But violence is not an answer. I'm not even trying to be a candidate for violence, but I'm just saying we are learning as human beings. We have impulse. Like the first thing when a man grab a woman and ass, the person should want to turn around and slap him. You know what I mean? Automatically, violence that's what we're used to. It just takes somebody to say, "Let me stop and think what to do." You understand? It's not. I'm not condoning violence, though. That's all I'm saying. But thank you anyway. Thank you for opening my mind tonight to all these different terminology. And is there discrimination against gays too? With all these different categories, I would think that there is some kind of discrimination. Or I'm asking, it's a question. I don't know. But with all these different categories, I never knew that there were so many out there. So do you see that, or it's not, it's a whole different world?
Can you reframe the question for me, please?
Discrimination with with so many different categories. Don't you think there's some kind of discrimination and even amongst themselves?
Absolutely.
Amongst different. Okay.
Absolutely. Okay. One of the biggest fights, I guess you could say, that we had within our own community is when gay marriage went forward. Trans community was like, I can't even get a job. I'm homeless. Employment ENDA, which was the Employment Non-Discrimination Act in the LGBT community, we thought should have came before marriage. But when you think about even race relations within the LGBT community, right? White LGBTQ folks and gay men, white gay men push forward gay marriage. Black LGBT folks was like, we need the Employment Non-Discrimination Act. Because we can't even get a job. I could get married on Saturday, come to work on Monday, and get fired for no reason.
Wow.
Right? So yeah, there is some, disagreement. Is that disagreement in the civil rights movement, right? Or even our modern day Black Lives Matter movement. But I think that so yeah, there is like disagreement within the community.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next question is from Tone. Where are you? Hang on.
Sorry, I'm trying to take this mute off.
Okay.
Earlier, I'm going back to the point when you mentioned when you went off, I believe it was in college, to the other trans woman, I believe. With that situation there, you had already came out as a 13-year-old. So, I'm wondering why you like went off on the dude. Were you, because you said it was like a little bit of self, your own situation coming to, like, I guess, to the light or in your personality at that particular time. I was wondering, the self-hatred I thought came from a person who I guess was in the dark about it. And then they project, I guess homophobia towards, other people because they're in the dark about theirs. But at that particular point, you were in the light about your situation. I was just curious, where did it come from?
Yeah, so yeah, I first came out to my mom at 13, but it wasn't accepted. So I wasn't in the light per se about who I was, because who I was, again, when we're talking about conversations with parents, what I got from that conversation is that who I was inherently wrong.
Oh, okay.
Now I'm internalizing this self-hatred because I told my mom, like, hey, mom, I'm gay. And she's like, oh, no, you're not. You're too young for that, right? And so now I internalized this self-hate for years. I didn't come out again until I was 21.
Okay, I get it. I got it.
Yeah.
Another thing, Jalen, like your situation, what you explained, I sort of like I guess, all of us when we're young, we might go through, like, I guess you could say, a little homophobia stage. But as you become, enlightened and understand human nature as you grow older and become knowledgeable, I just appreciate the fact how you handled your situation. Because as I came out of it, I said to myself, people have a right to just live their life and be happy with who they are. So when you describe that verbally, how you felt as you came along, I just want to live my life. I can respect that so much. I just, it gives, I guess, clarity to hear a person who's living who they are as they are, and then acknowledging that, saying it verbally out of their mouth. Just good to hear. That's all.
I appreciate you, Tone. Thank you. So it truly means a lot to me. It took a lot of, not to take away from the what's going on here from Dr. Douglas, but it's taken a lot of self-development, a lot of self-development, telling myself that, I wanted to be free. I wanted to free myself from whatever I was feeling. And I'm truly grateful, definitely grateful for this platform, definitely grateful that I was able to come on, and truly grateful and humbled that you would even just acknowledge the fact that I was able to verbalize that. So thank you so very much from the bottom of my heart, Tone.
Jay, I appreciate the show too. And
You broke up.
Douglas, Professor Douglas, I appreciate you being out here, and just Jay, you putting the show together. I
Thanks,
learned so
guys.
much today. I couldn't put the LG, BQT, together myself either. I understand that you gave it something. I can understand. I can say, oh, this is exactly what this person is identifying to.
Yeah.
One other thing I got is on that bus situation. It's real tricky. That's real tricky, because that bus situation with the trans women, that I say that's real tricky, because let's just say that would have happened and a guy would have did it to a straight woman. With the violence, would she be okay if she hooked this dude? You know what I mean? If it happened like that, and it wasn't like if somebody just rubbed against someone that was a woman, is she within her rights to use violence? Or she should just say, I don't know. I'm not sure. It's sort of like with that situation, if it's a guy's a man and you didn't have that opportunity to establish who you are beforehand, and they're just violating your rights as a human being by touching on you or rubbing on you per se, I don't know. I'm not advocating violence per se, but I'm just want to know, how would that be looked at as a woman hooking off on a dude? Is she okay to do that? No.
Yeah. So if the flip of it occurred, again, I don't condone violence at all. I just don't. But I do know the reality is that many women get groped and stuff very regularly on buses and trains, and they have no sort of defense, right? Even when they're like, yo, start cursing somebody out, like the defense isn't there. It's different for women, So yeah, I don't condone violence. I don't at all. Yeah.
I understand that. I mean, I
Yeah.
teach my daughter, and I taught my son how to. We all did this. I got a 22-year-old and a 19-year-old. We teach them how to protect themselves in public. Someone violates you, think about the situation and deal with it how you got to. Just being from the brick, that's just how it is. But I definitely understand that you want to have nonviolence. Sometimes you believe you're drawn to it too. That's another story for another day, another show for another day. But
Yeah. Thanks, cuz. Next is Loretta.
Hey, okay, so I have a lot of questions. So forgive me. Okay, so one thing is a statement so far. As far as the, that whole Rocco's whatever, the movie, and you asking about the consent given in schools with sex education. It is. I clarified it with my two kids. My son just graduated from high school. And my daughter graduated in 2015. So that permission is given by the parents. As far as anything that your child watches, as a parent, you should be monitoring what they're watching, because everything that is played on television, even down to the movies, they have ratings. So we need to be diligent about monitoring what our children watch. My kids are now 23, 18, and 12. And best believe, as my child is on YouTube, I'm over her shoulder. What are you watching? You know what I mean? I monitor everything. They hate it because I'm a busybody. But my thing is, you don't got no secrets because you ain't got your own house to pay your own bills. Okay. And then going into as a parent of three, my oldest daughter came out to me recently. I kind of knew, and I asked her, I've always taught them, no matter what, I'm going to love them no matter what their preference is. And like I said, I kind of had a suspicion probably last year, and I asked her and she denied it. When she came out to me recently, she said she was afraid. And I was like, but why? I've always told you I'm going to love you no matter what. There was a time when my son, he was a baby, and my cousin was pissed off because his pacifier was pink. I was like, dude, it's a freaking pacifier. Are you kidding me? The pacifier's in the hospital. The blue ones, they all ran out. They dropped it. They gave him a pink one. It's not that serious. So like, yesterday, he's going to be gay. I was like, dude, are you serious? And that same cousin was mad when my son was playing with dolls with his sister, his best friend. Who else? You know what I mean? My son is not, I would love him no different. And my ex, you know what he said? He addressed it as saying, even if he is, I'm going to love him no matter what, because he's still my son. And that's how he addressed when my daughter came out to us. We love her no matter what, and no matter who she loves. Who people love and who they have sexual encounters with ain't none of our business. Just like as a heterosexual woman, ain't nobody else's business who I encounter sexually. And that's how I feel about that. But my question is, as because I wrote it down, as a parent, how do you advise that I should defend my daughter when they have something to say? Because I'm pretty new to it in a personal manner, because this is my firstborn, and I become a straight mama bear. Like, I will rip your head off when it comes to my babies. So how do you advise as a parent to a child who just came out? What do you advise that I do, and how I approach the situation as far as people having their opinions that's not asked for?
Yeah. I don't know. I'm not a parent yet. However, I do know, like, I've seen my mom in action defending me. Like, when I finally came out to her and she's like, all right, well, I remember you told me this, and I'm realizing it's not a phase. This is who you are. I love you no different, right? And there have been times in the family, and people outside of the family who have disrespected me, and my mom went, she was like, stay out here. And she had words,
Right.
I'm not going to disrespect my child. My child can be who they want to be. And my mom had to correct it, and really, and what I saw was like, those were acts of love, where nothing was violent. My mom was like, no, you're not going to disrespect my child. No, they are a human being. And that's it. If you don't agree, that's you, but you're not going to disrespect them in their face and make them feel less than. Basically,
Right.
my mom did in those instances. And I say, you know, definitely do the same, because the reality is when your daughter is not in your presence, the world is tough.
Yeah.
You know, the world is tough. So to see those acts of love of someone defending them in such a way, it makes things a little bit less tough, you know?
Yeah, because once she came out to me, she came out to the world. It's like I was the most important person. Like, you know, no shade to her dad, but once she told me, she posted it. Like, she was like, world, here I am, and accept it, because mommy knows. Like, she
Yeah.
told her brother first. They got together, as they do, to because she was afraid. She was afraid I wouldn't accept her. And I was like, you're still my kid. Like, I'm gonna love you no matter what. No matter who you love, I'm gonna love you. And her girlfriend is amazing. I was hoping they'd be here today, but they couldn't make it, you know, to speak for themselves. Also, like, I have 3 more questions. As non-binary, do you feel it is harder to be a person of color in that community?
Mm-hmm. No, not really. I don't think that way.
Okay, because I know, you know, from maybe, I mean, I don't want to ask your age. I'm 42, so I'm X generation X, excuse me. So with my generation coming up, it just wasn't accepted. When we were in school, it wasn't accepted. It's accepted now. You know, the millennials generation is when it became okay. But especially in the households of people of color, I've just always known it just wasn't okay, mainly with the boys. It was like it was always more accepted with the females versus the boys. And yeah, I mean, I wasn't raised that way, but yeah, I've noticed that. So that's why I wanted to ask that question.
Yeah, and I'm glad that you brought that up, that distinction between women and men and families, or just in general, right? Like, that's another added layer is, you know, I do throw the onus back on men to really deal with their toxic masculinity, because that's hard for especially Black gay men to be Black gay men, right? It's tough, but that's having to deal with this idea that, like, if I'm gay, I'm less than a man, and that's not true at all. You know, I know some Black gay men that are absolutely men, you know, and every word is just, they just love differently, and that's okay. So yeah, I always, any instance I get, is try to throw it back on men, and especially in the Black community, to deal with that toxic masculinity. You have to.
Okay, I have 2 more questions. Can you just clarify, because I know the I, you mentioned the I versus hermaphrodite. I don't remember the actual term versus saying hermaphrodite. But you know, I'm one who always likes to be correct and learning the different terms, just as someone who's out in the community dealing with different people from different backgrounds. So can you just clarify that again?
Yeah, so the term is intersex. The best kind of way to illustrate it are like I said, but previously they used to be called hermaphrodites. Hermaphrodite is still a term used in science, like organized organisms and different specimens and stuff like that. But as it relates to humans, we use the term intersex. And what it really means are like people who, you know, may have been born with outwardly like a vagina, but inside you may see, you know, 2 testicles that never dropped, right? So they actually, while on the outside, they may have been raised as a woman, they, you know, they may, once they hit puberty, may develop with male sex characteristics, right? That's an example of intersex.
And my last question, I don't know if you'll be able to answer it. Do you or can you can you or do you know enough about the biological versus the choice? Because like, I know a bit, but I wanted to see if it can come from you. I've tried to explain this. I've attempted to explain this to many people, and there's just an agreement to disagree about it being biological versus being a choice.
Mhm. Yeah, so I mean, it's difficult to say that, like, you know, whether or not people are born gay or trans or whatever. For many people, they are, right? Like I know Jalen talked about, like, he knew since he was 3 or 4 years old that he was just in his body, right? I think sometimes where choice comes in is for people who choose not to express their sexuality or their gender identity, right? You know, there are people who, like, you know, are like, you just know are like gay, but they will deny it all to the end of the world for whatever reason, you know, like heterosexual, you know, and they're choosing not to be who they are. And then there are some people that are like, all right, this is who I am. So now I choose to express who I am. Right. That's where I feel like the choice comes in, is whether you know who you are, whether or not you're going to express that knowing, right? Some people choose yes, such as myself. I knew that I was gay for a very long time. I knew that I was queer or whatever. I knew that I was trans. I knew, you know, whatever. And I'm choosing to be, in my opinion, free. You know what I mean? But I could have made a very different decision where I was like, I know this about myself, and for whatever reason, I'm not going to live that as who I know that I am. That's where I think the choice comes in, not necessarily in terms of whether or not people just wake up and choose to be gay. Like I said earlier, who will actually sign up, you know what I mean, to want to, you know, walk out of their doors not knowing if that's going to be the day where they interact with somebody and they, you know, they might be having a bad day and now it's a hate crime. Who's going to sign up?
Right. I know, like, the debate was just that, you know, it was said to me, oh, it's not biological. And I was like, but no, they've shown it in the world of science that that gene is trackable. It's there. It's been proven. And it was just, no, that's a lie. And I'm like, I could show you. You know, that's where that debate came in. And just a quick, because I don't know if you saw in the chat that I you know, addressed, like, my 12-year-old went to school. I went to her school once when she was in elementary. She was in 5th grade, and it was on Halloween. And I saw, it was during a Halloween parade. I saw, you know, what I recognized as a little boy in a girl's costume. And I was like, okay. And I had a conversation with her after school. She's like, yeah, mommy, he's non-binary. I was like, do you know what that means? She's like, yeah. And just now, a few minutes ago, I asked her, I said, well, what are, you know, what's that child's pronoun? She was like, oh, they, them, and their. I was like, oh, and I never really taught her that. So it's just like they were taught that in school. And I know it was a debate on another podcast that why wasn't I asked permission? And I was like, I'm okay with that, only because as a child in her school that they had to be given a cultural sensitivity teaching about how to address that particular child who was in their school. No, I wasn't given notification. Am I particularly mad? No, I'm not, because my child sees it in the world. Like, she sees that there are parents, you know, she has children who have parents of, you know, 2 parents of the same sex. So does she ask questions? No. Why? Because I chose to, from a young age, from her, you know, with all of my children from a young age, to teach them about the world before they went out in it. But that's just me speaking as a parent. And that's why, you know, I'm a big advocate for the community without being very judgy. I can't be judgy, and I'm a Christian. So people may say, how can you be a Christian and not judge that it's in the Bible? And I said, but who am I? I'm not God. I can't judge. You know, that's not my place. That would be like, you know, me judging someone who drinks to be drunken. A sin is a sin is a sin, if you want to look at it that way. You know, I have no heaven nor hell to put anybody in. So that's just my aspect coming from a Christian who's a parent to a child in the community. So yeah, and I thank you so much, Professor Douglas, for your transparency on everything.
No problem. And that's the reality, is that, like, and I'm glad that you brought that scenario up with your kid, in terms of, instead of what I think a lot of parents do, they jump in and immediately like, no, this is wrong. Took a step back and say, well, what do you know about this? What is this? What is that? You know, and the kid already knows, like, it is what it is. Like, that's my buddy Joe, you know?
Yeah.
Like, but that's how kids are. We socialize kids into being homophobic, racist adults, right?
We make them weird. We make it weird.
Exactly. Kids are like, yeah, that's my buddy Joe. He
Yeah.
gets, kangaroo crackers at lunch.
Yeah, my son's best friend when we were living on Staten Island was a gay female, and I don't remember what her pronouns are. No, it's she. It's still she. She's just a gay female, and I was like, okay, but you still can't spend the night if her mom ain't home. Let's be clear. She still got a vagina, boo boo. Let's be clear. He's like, but ma, I was like, I'm still no. Her mother still has to be there because that's just how I was taught. At the end of the day, a parent still has to be in the house. But I love her no matter what. And when my oldest daughter came out to me and I had the conversation with my 12-year-old, I said, well, do you have any questions? She was like, yeah, no, it's still Talima. No, I'm good. It's still, she's still my sister no matter what. And I was like, all right, cool. I did okay. You know what I mean? So, yeah.
Exactly. Like even for me, I mean, I guess you could call me liberal, whatever. Like with my sister, like when she was younger, I took her to like prides just to, took her in front of drag queens and just to expose her to the world and to be able to answer any questions that she had, right? It's just like this, whatever. This is my, at the time when I identify as a female, this is my sister. Like, who cares? Like.
Yeah.
Like a lot of times we are the ones that instill these ideas in these kids. And to give you an example of that, like the first time I had experienced racism, I was 6 years old. I was at my grandmother's house and another 6-year-old girl told me, why don't you go play with your own kind? That's not natural for a kid. It's because the people in their household, the parents taught them, no, don't you go play with those Black kids a couple of houses down. And now instead of protecting the innocence of the kid, because the innocence of the kid was, we about to go just ride bikes around in the neighborhood. We strip the kid of the innocence because now they see me as this wrong person that they can't ride bikes with in the neighborhood, right? Wow. The innocence, we strip the innocence because the innocence is, that's my buddy Joe. He's different, but we swap kangaroo crackers at lunch. We like to go in the jungle gym at recess. That's the innocence, right?
Right.
Yeah.
We got time for one more question. We're actually over time right now. Somebody said to me, we're probably gonna have to do a part 2 to this because there's so many questions, but I have time for one more question. Whoever it was, they took their hand down. I know that Habi Legend had a question, but they took their hand down. So that might be it for now. I don't know if they're still on, but Professor Douglas, Dougie, I know they used to call you Dougie in high school. Yeah, I actually just sent Professor Douglas a picture from our old JROTC banquet that I'm pretty sure she'd never seen. You'd never seen it, so
I apologize. I was calling you Dr. Douglas.
No, I'm not a doctor.
So I do apologize. My bad.
Sorry.
Definitely, but I appreciate you all for coming on. Before we head out, just gotta plug a couple of things that we have coming up. First off, thank you all for coming on. I really, really appreciate it. Professor Douglas,
thank you.
I appreciate you coming on. Again, this has been months in the making. I think that we first spoke about this in September.
Yeah.
About us doing this. I definitely look forward to hopefully having you on again. It was very, very enlightening having you on. I learned a lot. When the goal is to hopefully continue this conversation, for us to all evolve, for us to all learn more. So again, I definitely appreciate you for coming on. And whenever you want to come back on, the door is always open for you.
Awesome. Thank you. I appreciate everybody having an open mind, just listening. Like I tell you, my students, what's learned here, take it with you, teach someone else, right? If everything isn't for you, it's okay to leave it here, but I appreciate everybody having an open mind tonight. I thank you, James, for having me. I enjoyed the conversation. So thank you.
Thank you. Now, before we leave, just to let everyone know, I actually do 2 shows. My co-hosts are actually on here with me. I have another show called Extreme Truth that we do on Mondays. This is actually the flyer for it. We have an interesting topic this week. We're going to talk about betrayal, a time that you've been betrayed, a time that someone has betrayed you. Was it justified and how you dealt with it? So it's, everyone is definitely invited to see it or to tune in to talk about it. This is the flyer for it. You can go to the Extreme Truth Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube channel. Please feel free to watch the videos. For those of you that are new to the Fall to Rise podcast, all of the older episodes are available on YouTube. If you go to the Fall to Rise podcast YouTube channel, we've covered everything from mental health in the Black community to daddy issues and how they affect men. We've had episodes on depression. We've had episodes on abstinence, suicide, molestation, you know, all those conversations that Black people aren't supposed to talk about in public. So we've definitely done episodes on them. So feel free to go to the YouTube channel, which is Fall to Rise podcast. Please like, subscribe, share, you know, so that we can grow, you know, so that we can come up with some new things. We also have a Fall to Rise podcast. We have a Fall to Rise podcast. I'm sorry, Fall to Rise podcast Instagram, Fall to Rise podcast Facebook page. Please like and subscribe if you ever have any ideas or anything that you wanted to cover or any subjects that you wanted to talk about, because there's nothing that's too taboo. Please feel free to contact me, reach out to me, Fall to Rise podcast at Gmail, or again, go on the Fall to Rise podcast Instagram or Facebook page and the YouTube. And for Monday's show, it is at 8:00 Eastern time, 5 p.m. Pacific time. And I have friends of mine in Africa. I don't know what time it is out there. Just you're just gonna have to look because they have so many different time zones. And the Q&A section of this show was actually sponsored by Craftations by Lavada. She makes a lot of custom clothing, hoodies, face masks. She can custom sneakers. She's also a crocheting wizard. So if you go to her Facebook and Instagram page, it's Craftations by Lavada. I actually push it so hard because she's my older sister, but she's also the sponsor for this show. So normally we'd stick around a lot longer, but my lodge is actually getting together tonight because we're giving away toys to an orphanage in Jersey City. So I kind of have to go and I'm running late. So, but I really, really appreciate you all for coming on. And
Yes,
again,
thank you.
Professor Douglas, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Everyone,
Thank you
please
and good night.
Thank you so much.
No
Okay.
problem.
thank you, thank you,
Yes,
thank you. Everyone
Good
have a
night.
safe
Thank
night.
you.
All right.
You too.
Thank you.
All
Night,
Thank you.
everybody.
Bye.
Good night. Good night.